Well, to kick it off, I mean, at Kansas State, really walk us through how you make some of those decisions when it comes to campus dining, not only with procurement, but looking at supplier decisions, all of that. Just walk us through that process.
Sure. Well, just a little bit of background on housing and dining services at K-State. Well, first of all, for those of you who don't know, Kansas State University is a land-grant university. We're heavy in ag and engineering. And we are a department that's based on the housing group, residential housing, and also dining services. We report to the student affairs or student life part of the university, not the finance side of things. So that's a little bit about how we're organized. When we look at our suppliers, our distributors are few now. We used to have a lot of variety in distributors to choose from. They've all bought each other out, and mainly we have Cisco and U.S. Foods and Benny Keith are the main distributors that we work with. So what's important to us is to be able to get products into the dining centers at the volumes that we need. We serve about 8,000 meals a day, and so it requires a tremendous volume of food to do that. And so we're working with our distributors to find products that work in our recipes, because we do make almost all of our food from scratch. We just can't change an ingredient on a whim because it really affects the outcome of the recipe. So we're looking at product availability, having enough stock to be able to provide the volume of items that we need.
Does animal welfare ever come into play? I mean, ultimately, is it about availability and price, or does animal welfare ever come up in some of those discussions?
It's coming up more than it ever has before, the animal welfare aspects of things. I do think that we're a bit insulated in the Midwest, especially at K-State, where we're a land-grant university. The coast schools definitely deal with this a lot more. But our students are starting to ask where the food is coming from, and we've been asking that question, a lot in the last 10 years. What are we buying overseas that could be contaminated with mercury? And then eliminating that as options for our ingredients coming in.
I mean, Topanga, I know you're in the ag school, but what kind of questions do you get from your peers? I mean, do they have more questions now about, well, is GMO-free better, antibiotic-free better? I mean, do they have more of these questions coming up and coming to you?
I mean, being an ag communication student, I find myself in the journalism school quite a bit and a few other places. So I'm in an ecology for the environment class right now, which is an incredibly, basically, here's why agriculture is bad for the environment class is really what it is. But in that class, we do talk a lot, and I'd say in my peers, the big question that they have about ag more than anything else is, how is agriculture affecting the environment? Those are the conversations we're having, is especially in terms of beef production being in more of a beef area, is how is beef affecting the environment? How can we be more sustainable? Is what you're doing okay for the environment more than anything else? And that's from my peers back home in Colorado too. It's not as much, I think, anymore about the animal welfare as it is the environmental impact.
So do you feel like you have positive discussions about that? Is there a lot of pushback? How have those conversations evolved?
I think that it has gotten better as we've had more discussions and been able to see more, I'm able to understand better too, which is helpful. But I think it's a very global problem that we talk about a lot. We talk a lot about, is it really reasonable to be, eating beef worldwide? Do we need to just completely take meat out of the equation? And so it gets to a point where the conversation can't be had anymore, and that's where it's difficult. But in general, I think it's mostly just people looking for answers, and they can't find the answers yet, and that's very hard to do.
Melissa, sometimes in agriculture we focus on the bad, right? The negativity of some of these conversations that are happening. But at the end of the day, really it's getting people that maybe didn't know what was in their food or how their food's produced. It's bringing that, shedding light on that. So do you have conversations about that? I mean, do you try to educate students about how that food is produced, where it comes from, some of that really on the education side to students?
Absolutely. At Housing and Dining Services, we see our mission as not only being able to feed students every day to support their education, but also educating them. I mean, we do work in higher education, and we have that responsibility to help them learn about where their food comes from. We do a lot of smaller events on a small-scale basis in the dining centers that might highlight a particular product. It's difficult for us with our broadline distributors to also work with the local farmer directly. So we work with our distributors who then work with our local farmers. So we're getting local products in, and we're getting those through our distributors, but sometimes it's hard to get the message out because we don't know which local farm that came from on that particular delivery. So we do try to do some focused events, bringing in local farmers specifically, have them there, have our chef there, make food that's really delicious, very appealing, and be on site to answer questions. So it's really a lot of small initiatives that hopefully make a big impact over time.
Do you feel like it's making a big impact? I mean, do you feel like you're really moving the needle in some of these activities that you're doing?
I do. We have students that are very engaged in asking questions, and I have a lot of comments that come back in our comment box afterwards that said, we want this again, this was really cool, I didn't know it could taste this good. And so I think that over time we'll get there as far as educating the students. But we are at a disadvantage to some point because we house primarily freshmen, some sophomores. So you have like one shot every year sometimes to impact these students. They're not with us for 4 years, so we can continue to educate them.
And remember, if you have a question, just raise your hand. Cliff?
Good morning. I'm Cliff Becker with Farm Journal Media. Melissa, this is for you. Right before I left to come over here on Tuesday, there was a report on our local Kansas City TV about the change in school lunch programs. I think this is probably more for the elementary and high school. And a lot of that was associated with waste. Kids just aren't eating what's on the current program. So I've got two questions. My first is waste. How have you seen that either escalate over the last 17 years? And the second thing is you've got a great history there. How has the meat component changed from kind of a pound or percentage scenario? I know, like, even before I left school, I graduated college in '83. I know you weren't even.
You really aged yourself, Jim.
But even when I was in school, they started bringing salad bars in and things like that to try to look at the different nutritional or food wants and needs. Can you tell us a little bit how that evolution has been and how meat has kind of either gained or waned in those 17 years?
Sure. So I'll address the waste question first. We have to look at waste from two perspectives. We look at it from the operator perspective with what we can control, and then we look at it from the student perspective with how can we help them control their waste. So from the operator perspective, K-State's been a leader for the last 20 years in waste management. Dr. Carol Shanklin, who's now Dean of the Graduate School, was doing research on waste back in the 90s when it really wasn't cool to talk about. So from an operator perspective, we look at purchasing products that don't have a lot of packaging waste to them, number one. From a food waste standpoint, we have best practices in place so that we're controlling the food waste and as far as how much we're trimming off a product. And then once we trim it, where does that trim go? Also looking at how much food we're producing. We don't just make our 3,500 meals a day and put them in a warmer and walk away. We're monitoring the rate of customers coming in and cooking as much as we can right to those customers so that we're not overproducing food and creating a substantial amount of leftovers that then have to be dealt with. We also look at composting where we can, although that is just more waste. We work with the Department of Agronomy to send our compost out to their compost piles, and then that compost gets used by facilities on campus. So we really try to look at the waste from the time it hits our dock up until the time the person or the student puts it on their plate. Now, from the student standpoint, well, Kramer is a newly renovated and partially brand new dining center as of this August. Kramer before was a tray system where you came in and got your plate. You also got a big purple tray, and the tendency with consumers is to fill that tray up. And I'm as bad as anyone. I'd have 4 or 5 little bowls and 2 glasses and all this. I didn't need all that by any means. Our students would do the same thing. And so when Kramer opened in the fall, we went to a trayless system, and that was part of the planning initiative because you do have to have certain equipment. I was listening to this session before and talking about the equipment investment. We have to have a huge investment in equipment to be able to accommodate something as simple as taking trays away. So with the removal of trays, we saw food waste drop significantly. We used to see trays come back on the dish belt that might have half the food left on them, and now we're seeing just a few pizza crusts. And it's really not an exaggeration. I stood there at the dish belt and thought, oh my gosh, why didn't we do this 10 years ago? Because there's no waste anymore. When you only have 2 hands and you can only carry 2 plates, and it makes you think about what you're putting on your plate and how much you're taking. And so I think we've had to help our students understand the waste aspect by forcing them into less service dishes. So.
How about the beef one? What's beef, or not beef, sorry, meat?
So in regard to meat, and I came in kind of after the whole, now we have a salad bar type thing. We've really, we're Kansas State, and we've seen our beef consumption and meat consumption continue to stay high. The students that we feed are a lot of students coming from production backgrounds. I mean, I was one of those. They like their chicken fried steaks. They like their roast beef. They love chicken breast. They're not going to quit eating meat. And so we've never, and I think we'll continue to take the stance, we don't want to say eat less meat because we don't think that's the right message to send. It's a real negative message towards the industry. Personally, I think it's just an offensive message too. What our message is eat more fruits and vegetables and whole grains. So we know that we get plenty of protein in our Western diet, but we don't get enough fruits and vegetables. So our focus now is eat more fruits and vegetables, eat more whole grains, and naturally your consumption of meat might decrease a little bit because you're probably getting already twice as much protein as you need to begin with. But the meat consumption, at least for K-State, has remained very steady.
It's like when we saw the push for meatless Mondays. I mean, I don't even know if that's still a thing because I don't see it all the time anymore like I used to. But did you ever have any pressure from certain groups on campus to create meatless Mondays?
We never did. But I know of other schools through our national organization, other food service directors I talk to that work on the coast or even down south, they do have a push for meatless Mondays. They have implemented things like that. Again, at K-State, where we're in the Midwest, I think it's an offensive message. We haven't had groups on campus coming to us saying, why are we still serving meat on Mondays? Or we need to have a meat-free day. We just don't have that. But I think that other universities do really struggle with that because they don't have a student base that has an appreciation for agriculture or even common sense in some regard.
It's refreshing to hear.
I mean, it's...
Yeah. Did you have a question back there?
Yeah, I'm Beth Holtz with Seaboard Foods. In the age of mommy bloggers, kids are now going to college, and helicopter parents, what kind of influence do the parents have on what you guys serve in the dining center?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I've been with K-State for 16 years, and we've not had parents that are necessarily trying to influence our buying purchases or what we're serving. We see the helicopter parent come in with those students that have food allergies or a special need. The parent will come to us or the parent will call us and say, my son, my daughter, and we have to work really hard to actually find the son or daughter to get them there, to talk to them. And so that's where we're seeing helicopter parents come in. We haven't had a lot of comments or even any initiatives to serve a certain amount of food or a certain type of food from the parent population per se.
Question over there?
Yes, thank you. Is this on?
Yep.
I'm curious, how have student expectations evolved when it comes to food on campus? Like, I know you've mentioned you've been at K-State for 16 years. Have you seen students start to demand changes in the food that they're served, whether it be non-GMO or organic or grass-fed meat, or has that changed since you've been affiliated with the university?
It has changed, but maybe not in the way that you're thinking about. We don't get a lot of requests for cage-free eggs, or I only want organic vegetables to be served. Our changes have come through students demanding more variety. So when I first started at K-State, we were limited to one entree per student, And we had, the salad bar, the dessert bar, and a couple other options: pizza, classics menu, tacos, and deli. Now students are coming and they're expecting a variety of more culinary-oriented foods. So they have higher expectations for pizza. Now it's not good enough to just have a pepperoni pizza. We need a pepperoni pizza on hand-tossed crust, made in our wood stone-fired oven. That's what they want. I mean, they don't care if the pepperoni necessarily is sourced sensibly or what. They have different culinary expectations and definitely variety expectations. It's no longer good enough to serve one yogurt. At breakfast, we need to have a Greek yogurt, and then we need to have a low-fat yogurt, and then because Greek yogurt isn't typically low-fat, and then we need to have a yogurt with fruit. So the variety expectations have increased substantially, but we haven't seen the push for organics and other types like that.
Quick follow-up. Do you think that is somewhat unique to being in the Midwest, or what is are you hearing things within the campus community more broadly on the coast?
Her question is, just so everyone else hears, do you think that's unique to the Midwest, or are you hearing about the same on the coasts?
I do think it's unique to the Midwest. The food service directors that I'm friends with, like at Berkeley and some on the East Coast, UMass, places like that, they are getting requests like that. And they're actually developing specific menu concepts around organic or around some other type. But we're getting a lot of requests for food allergies too. Like, we want a peanut-free dining center, or we want a gluten-free dining center. I think we get more of those requests overall as a segment of the industry than we do for cage-free eggs.
And the gluten-free, is that because they actually need to be gluten-free, or they want to be?
I think most of it's because they want to be gluten-free, but you do have that small population that it's real important to them for health reasons.
But to be in college again, where your biggest problem of the day is if my pizza's wood-fired or not. I mean, that really. Okay, question here in the front.
Yeah, Topanga, yesterday's consumer focus group. Were you in here for that?
Yeah, I was.
How would you contrast that with what you see on campus? Same groups, same interests, the way they make selections. I tend to think of them as different groups, but maybe it's just an echo. Maybe it's the same thing in your environment.
Yeah, I'd say for the younger individuals on that panel, I would say that is honestly what I hear from a lot of my peers and my friends, not just limiting that to Kansas State, but to my friends back home as well at Colorado State, that if they had the option to be able to choose some of those more organic or vegan options, that they would, if they could financially afford that. But because they can't, they choose to continue to keep meat and eggs in the diet. In terms of going out to eat as much as they do and what type of places they're going, I'd say that you do have those two different. Definitely with most of my group, if you're going somewhere local, that's what you're looking for. You want that environment and that culture that a local place gives you. You want to be able to personally be able to connect to wherever you're eating, not just simply get food. For about half of us, and then I'd say the other half were like the other individual who said he just needs something fast and quick and wants that Chick-fil-A. You get both of those, and I'd say you're usually either one or the other. They were a pretty good representation, quite honestly.
Question in the back.
Yeah, being from a land-grant university, you've got unique access to information that some of the other universities don't, but do you both feel like you have what you need from an information standpoint from any of the industries across agriculture, or what can we provide to you as information and outlets, and how should we get that to you for information for both of you to spread and put the message out? What do we need to do to help you if you don't have it?
I think as a student, we, especially that are in the agriculture industry and do want to be a voice for, we are always looking for different resources to use, whether that be a lot of different groups that have different online training programs. Those are incredibly helpful to us because then we feel like we have the resources and the certification to really talk about what's going on, because there's just so much to agriculture, and it's hard because we find anymore that when people come to us, we can't just be an expert on our part of the industry. We have to be an expert on all of the different species, on all of the different parts of agriculture, and that's very difficult to do. And so being able to have those resources that maybe take us through a couple steps is helpful, as well as, I mean, on social media, that's probably one of the best ways. Is I think usually what honestly ends up happening is you find one of the more influential individuals in your circle who has connected with many of your different groups who are here. You have a great video or infographic that just resonates well with us. It gets shared, and then it goes everywhere, and it just, you had to find the right individual to do that, but that's honestly the best way to get to us.
I definitely think that the food service industry could use more educational resources, but ours, I feel like, need to come in the form of opportunities. I feel very fortunate that my commercial ag background lends me to helping others understand behaviors with farmers and ranchers, especially because that's what my background is. But I think that in order to change behavior, you have to have an emotional side to something. And when you provide opportunities for chefs, for registered dietitians, for any of our staff to go out to a farm and see how much this person cares about their animals, cares about their weed or their produce, that hits you emotionally, and that changes your behavior and your feelings towards something. I know the Kansas Beef Council has done a program for quite a few years now where they get a group of registered dietitians that are kind of representative from all over the state, and they take them around to different farms, and they take them around to different restaurants that feature meat items on them. And it's really interesting in my circle of friends on Facebook how these registered dietitians are like, oh my gosh, it's like a revelation. It's the most wonderful thing ever. They visited this ranch and now they understand. And it's really, I think the opportunities to learn firsthand and play off people's emotions are what's going to change perspective and behavior on these things. And I think that working through national organizations is one way to start with that, because they can reach a lot of people very quickly. People want to go and do tours, and they want these educational opportunities. So working like through NACUFS for us, which is the National Association of College and University Food Service, or the NRA, any of those groups, dietetics organization, that would be effective, I think. But we definitely don't have all the educational resources that we need to be able to share good information to our students.
Melissa, does sustainability within food production, does it matter to you? And if so, what is your definition of sustainability?
It does matter to us at K-State. And for us, we look at sustainability as, are we sourcing products responsibly? Are we buying local where we can, or supporting at least the regional economy? Are we being sustainable by having good management practices that allow us not to waste food or to minimize food waste? And then the food waste that we have, if it's safe and it's not of a quality we can serve back to our students, we're donating it to the Flint Hills Bread Basket or some other organization like that, and then being able to compost and kind of complete the cycle if it's a product that should be composted. So from a sustainability standpoint, we're looking at it in that regard. We also do a lot of recycling, and so the packaging materials that we get, we're recycling those on campus, and we've been doing that for, 12 or 15 years, so that's not new.
Topanga, you've been doing a really good job about education about agriculture, not only with your peers at school, but also with your blog, to the masses. What would you say is your biggest success story so far?
It's a very interesting situation. Because a lot of the tags on my blog have to do with animals, I get a lot of vegan followers, actually, who don't realize that my blog is an ag blog because they're cute pictures of cows. And they like sharing cute pictures of cows, and then I'll post something educational, and then the attacks will come. And there was one individual who I had responded calmly to, just explaining, I appreciate your care for animals. I care for animals too, and had a conversation there. And it was just kind of relentless, so I just kind of let it go. But I had another vegan follower who came and apologized for her and was like, I promise we're not all that bad, that not all of us are crazy. I respect what you do. I respect that you raise your animals. I still will choose not to eat your products, but I apologize that she attacked you in that way. And not necessarily something I expect from someone whose values are very different from mine. But it was kind of a cool moment to say, okay, we are incredibly, incredibly different. You have no idea who I am, and I'm probably against a lot of what I do, but for you to be able to still respect what I've done and the way I handle things it was cool. It was very cool, to say the least.
That is really cool. I'd call that a win, for
Yeah.
sure. If any of you have questions, just raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone around. I mean, Melissa, you talked a little bit about your background, but why are you so passionate? I mean, you're not against animal agriculture. You know, you've made that very clear. Why are you so passionate about agriculture and really implement that into your daily job?
Oh gosh, I wasn't prepared for that question. I think, you know, if the United States is going to lead the effort in feeding the world, we have to be able to be efficient and productive. And, you know, I love feeding the college and university age group. They're great. They're so excited about life and have all these great ideas, and they're really open to learning. And I think that, you know, that's where my passion comes from, is from that age group and their zest for life and being like sponges for information. We are, I don't know, how many people have heard of Menus of Change? Has anyone heard of Menus of Change? This is a joint effort with the Culinary Institute of America, the Harvard School of Public Health, and higher education. It's about a 5-year-old program, and the vision of this program is to provide optimal nutrition coupled with sustainability, coupled with social responsibility. And this Menus of Change, and these concepts are really driving how the college university menus are evolving. And some of the principles within it make a lot of sense, but some can be taken out of context, I think, and that's something that I'm concerned about, is when one of the principles is eat less red meat less often, that can be really taken out of context, and what you get is meatless Mondays. So that is something that you might all want to take note of, is the Menus of Change principles and how those are being used to guide how our menus are going from a college university standpoint and also from a restaurant standpoint. There's a lot of good principles to it, but I think some can really be taken out of context by the right people.
Yeah. Question?
Yeah, so I actually have a question. So I go to Ohio State, and we have 60,000 students, and we have a lot of international students, and I'm not sure how the dynamics are at K-State if there are a lot of international students. But do you try and meet their food wants and their food needs by sourcing those ingredients locally, or do you reach out to international suppliers to get? I know we serve a lot of sushi, a lot of Asian-inspired foods in our dining halls.
Good question. Most of those international ingredients are available through our normal distribution channels now. When I started, they weren't available, but everything, like we make our sushi from scratch, and it's everything we need we can get from U.S. Foods. So we do like the input of those communities, though. Obviously, we're much smaller than Ohio State, and I know their food service director really, really well. He's a very progressive individual, and anyway, we do focus on international foods and get their input for the foods that are common and try to make them as authentic as possible without being offensive to the entire student group that we're feeding. But we definitely have a focus on international foods, and that kind of ties into the culinary focus that we're evolving into now.
Yeah, another question over there.
Yeah, for Topanga. So there's not a ton of college students in the room, but hopefully those here are mentors to either high school or college students. So what would you say for us when we're talking with those individuals that we're hopefully mentoring when it comes to advice for starting a blog like you have?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just helping a student find that confidence to feel like their voice matters. I think a lot of it's like, well, I'm a lowly college student. There's how many other college students with a blog? Who's going to listen to me, right? You know? And so I think the main thing is just being encouraging and helping students find that unique story that they have, because everybody has something very unique to them and that they can utilize and really capitalize on a blog. And so if you can help them find that way to recognize that in themselves, they'll have the confidence and then the creativity to be able to be successful with it.
Topanga, a follow-up on that. What do you think is the most effective way for us to actually reach students and educate those students about food and agriculture? What do you think is the most effective way to do that?
As in, like, your general population students who maybe don't have a connection?
Yeah, just, I mean, with your peers that maybe don't have an understanding of agriculture, how should we reach them?
I mean, I think the way that I could see it being most successful is college students like free food, right? We live for free food because we don't want to have to pay for free food. The great thing about being on a college campus is we look out for free food. We have group meetings specified just to see where there's free food on campus. We will look on Twitter. You all are part of the food industry because of what you do. So if you can either hook up with an organization on campus or come to campus in some way and be able to maybe give some of your product to students, they will be interested in talking with you to get that food from you. But then they are willing to listen. They want to hear about it. We had some animal rights activists come to campus before, and so we had another group that came up next door and set up a bacon stand next to it, and the bacon stand kind of went over next to the animal rights activists. So if you can just come and talk to us directly, I think that's your best way, honestly, more than social media or anything else, because we still like that personal connection more than anything else, and I think that's overlooked.
And we get the request for the free food through dining services. And so, always working through the distribution channels or coming to us directly and saying, hey, I'd really like to do this event for bacon. Mm-hmm. They will come. All we have to do is say, hey, we're doing an event. It's free. They'll show up.
Because we'll also come to the free food of, if there's a vegan group or something like that, we'll go to that too. So you have to compete with that. But bacon sells better.
Topanga, when you graduate, I guarantee you'll still like free food.
I figure as much.
I still like free food. Okay, question in the back.
So I'm curious, this is probably more applicable to the East Coast schools, but the dining centers that are serving the organic, those options, how are those dining centers funded? And does that take away from opportunities for education or for scholarships, or the funding that is used for that food? Is that somehow not going to something else the university needs?
I don't know that I can completely speak accurately to that. Obviously there's a lot of private schools in the U.S., and smaller private liberal arts schools are probably more susceptible to having misunderstanding as far as ag goes and food production. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Yeah. Now, state schools, at least the ones that I'm familiar with, in K-State, Housing and Dining Services gets no state tax dollars at all. We are completely operating off room and board fees. And I'm thinking with my peers, or about my peers, most of them are all room and board fees too. I don't think anyone is getting state tax dollars. So private schools, I'm not exactly sure where they're generating all their dining revenue at, but I would guess a lot of it's room and board.
Any other questions? Okay, then let's wrap things up. For each of you, what do you want to leave us with? What's the one point you really want to drive home? Topanga, we can start with you. Put you on the spot.
All right, one point I want to drive home. I think, at least as we talk in terms of college students, there's a lot of variety. I think we hear a lot of anymore of an expectation that we may either fit in more of this like vegan, anti-ag area, or we might be like me and very pro-ag in that. Really, in the end, college students are still pretty normal. They do care about their food more than others, and I think that's something you can capitalize on. We're all foodies, and so we do care about our food, and we want to hear about it, and we want to connect with you more than we ever have before. And so take advantage of that. We'd love to talk.
I think getting out ahead of misinformation is key in providing resources and opportunities for food service providers to learn hands-on how the industry works and what the best practices are. Getting ahead of that curve is really important. So I think just the communication, the education opportunities for food service providers is a key.